learning objectives for this afternoon, and if I talk too fast, raise your hand and just say, Jamie, slow it down. Or if you can't hear me, I can definitely raise it up some decibels. We're just going to talk about history of pickleball, a couple of facts and figures, common injuries, how to prevent those injuries, which is really why you're here. And then we're going to go over a dynamic warm-up, which is something that everybody should be doing every time before they play. So we'll go over that. We have a nice handout for you that you can take home. And then after that, if we have time, questions and answers. If you guys have any questions for John, Evan, or myself, and we can hopefully get those answers for you. So what is pickleball? Combination of tennis, ping pong, and badminton. Little bit faster moving than your general tennis game. Played on a smaller court, as you all know, with a smaller ball that does not bounce high. So what do you have to do to get that ball? You got to squat down, right? That ball is not coming up to you like in tennis, which was one of my hardest. Smaller racket, lower bouncing ball. So you have to have a lot of quick feet and be able to get down into lower squatting positions. Underhand serve, which is nice for people that have shoulder issues, which we do see a lot in tennis players and some pickleball players, because you are doing some overhead shots, but you have to be outside the kitchen, right? No volleying in the kitchen. You'll learn that too as you start to play. And then, yes, pickleball does involve, like tennis, it's quick motion lateral, which is side to side, forward and back. However, the thing that's a little bit different than pickleball and tennis, because you are on a shrunken down court, you have to cover a smaller area with a little bit quicker steps instead of doing more of like a leap. And that's where some people do get into trouble, tripping on their feet and whatnot. So that is that's kind of the overview. Would anybody like to add anything about the differences between pickleball and tennis, or did I cover that pretty well? Okay. Next up, history, facts, and figures. So pickleball's been around for a long time. 1965, a congressman from Washington, he and his friends they were trying to play a game. They picked up literally things from the garage and threw this game together. There's a little controversy on how the name actually came into existence. You'll hear some people say it was named after their dog Pickle. Joel Pritchard, the gentleman who started, his wife thought that it reminded her of the rowing pickle boat, where they kind of like threw in a little bit of mishmash, and that's where they came up with the name. But nobody really knows for sure. Last several years, it has been the fastest growing sport in the United States, bar none. It is amazing to see the changes that have occurred over the past 5 to 7 years. These numbers, when I was putting together, I about fell out of my chair when I looked from 2021 to 2023. So 2021, there were 4.8 million players in the US. Fast forward to 2022, 8.9, so it doubled. Last year, 36.5 million players. It is just growing by leaps and bounds. If you take a look at that number, 36.5 million, that is 14% of the adult population in the United States. That's a lot of people playing. And right now, there are over 10,000 courts to play on, whether those are kidnapped tennis courts that have been retrofitted for pickleball, or ones that are just being built for pickleball courts. Who here lives in neighborhoods that have their own dedicated pickleball courts that are not retrofit tennis courts? Nice. And then how many have retrofit tennis courts? Okay. Does everybody's neighborhood have pickleball and tennis, or do you have to go elsewhere to play? Y'all are lucky. I don't have them in my neighborhood, so my husband and I have to go down the Lewis waterfront and play. Okay, here we go. A little bit more, just to kind of give you an idea of who is playing. 18 to 34-year-olds represent actually the largest age bracket of players. But the age, I know, you're like shocked, you're like, wow. And the average age of players is going down every year. I think right now, yes, 38 is the average age for this year. I think last year was 39 and a half. So slowly coming down. However, 65 and older have the largest percentage of people that we call core players, that you are regular players. This number, the 38-year-olds, they play like every once in a while, but it is the 65 and older that really are the ones that grind and love it. Currently, men are just a little bit, they have 60%, a little bit more men playing than women, but women numbers are growing because take a look at over right here. We have a little bit more women than men. South Atlantic area, as you can imagine, has the greater number of courts and players in the United States, and most of that is east of the Mississippi. Weather has a lot to do with it, obviously, because there's not a ton of indoor pickleball courts. Where I played in Virginia, I was at a tennis academy, basically, is where my husband and I played tennis and pickleball. We started playing pickleball about 8 years ago inside our basketball gym. So we had to tape off the lines, and then we eventually got them to retrofit 2 of our outdoor courts. But we were always playing pretty much outside if we wanted to play in a regular court. And Naples, Florida is the capital of pickleball. Just a little bit of trivia in case you were all wondering.
So I just also want to know the 18 to 34 is surprising, but not that surprising to me, because they're not teaching it in elementary school. They're starting them in elementary school.
It's everywhere. My husband and I just, because sometimes we can't get down to the courts, we bought just a portable net for our neighborhood, and we draw out the lines on our courts, and the kids that love to play are our 4- and 3-year-old neighbors. And they come and knock on the door, Miss Jean, can we have the pickleballs, please? And so there are a lot of people are playing. And if you look at the tennis or the pickleball tournaments, a lot more in the younger age groups are starting to play. Okay, injuries. This is one of the reasons why we are here. 92% of the fractures that you will see or that people experience when playing pickleball result from a fall. Mostly it's going to be a wrist for women and a hip for men. Why do you think the difference in the two sexes and body parts might be?
Women reach out with better to try and stop the ball.
And generally men are going to be taking larger lunging motions. But in women, it is definitely the wrist. Look at that number. Fractures for pickleball players have gone up 250% in the past 4 years. This doesn't even include the 2023 number. So I'm going to go with a 300% if I had to extrapolate that number out. So again, we're seeing a lot of injuries, and they do run the gamut, but some of these are preventable. Women are more likely than men to experience a fracture, and mostly in the upper body, in the forearms. And then down here, men are more likely to be hospitalized because if they break a hip, you're not going to just get that sucker wrapped up and go home. You're going to be you'll be in there for a little while. So a little bit more hospitalization for the men. And there is a study that I found that results haven't been published yet that between 2017 and 22, the incidence of injuries rose faster than the sport's popularity. So we're seeing, yes, sport is growing, but also so are the injuries. Soft tissue injuries are the most common, and fractures and worsening arthritis were found in patients greater than 60 years older. We divide our injuries when we talk about pickleball into acute injuries and chronic injuries. An acute injury is basically something that happens. That would be a fracture or a ruptured Achilles. An acute injury is not, oh, I've got arthritis in my knee or my shoulder and that's acting up, or I've got wrist tendonitis and it's been exacerbated. So acute pickleball injuries are definitely something that is related to a fall, a sudden turning or pivoting motion, which pickleball you're going to see a lot of. An ankle sprain, an acute injury, these are the more common ones that we see. Achilles tendon sprain or a rupture, knee injuries, meniscus. Though meniscus do not like pickleball. They are not fans of it, especially with any planting and twisting motions. Those are things you have to really be careful of. And if you do have a prior knee injury, make sure that you are really mindful of that. And if you have not, if you're starting to get pain with that, seek advice from either a PT or a doctor. Muscle strains, quads, hamstrings, hip flexors. A lot of people are running to get something, they go down and they're like, oh my, or they don't squat and they bend like this and they do a nice little tear to their hamstring, take off too fast, their hip flexor doesn't like that. Hip flexor's right here, your hamstrings are right here, and your quads are right here, just for a quick anatomy review. So those are 3 areas that we definitely see the most soft tissue strains. Fractures, again, arms, wrists, could be ankle as well. And again, all of these injuries, they are going to range in severity. You might have a mild ankle sprain. You might be off the court for 2 weeks. That can also go up to a moderate and a severe where you are out of the game for a while. With those, make sure that you get medical attention sooner rather than later. Don't let it sit and fester and say, oh, it's going to get better, it's going to get better. 9 times out of 10, the faster you get to medical attention, the quicker you're going to get back on the court. Okay, chronic pickleball injuries. Overuse or repetitive pounding on the hard court. One of my patients right now I'm seeing because he played 3 hours of pickleball with a 10-minute break, and now his knees are not happy. He doesn't necessarily, he has knee arthritis, he's had a meniscal injury in the past. So right now we're just working on trying to get some strengthening going, a little bit of flexibility, but also working on balance as well, because his balance needs to be, and that is one that we see a lot. It's just something that's been laying under the surface, and then you play. Yeah, I'll play another set, but I mean, yeah, that's good. And then next thing you know, it's 2 hours later, and you're like, okay, I'm coming home. So just make sure, think about putting your rest time into your day, or how many times a day or a week you're going to play pickleball. If you're playing back-to-back-to-back days, limit how much you're playing on those back-to-back days. Lumbar muscle strains, again, if you're bending down to get a ball and you're doing this versus this, most likely your back's going to start talking to you. People that have lateral or medial epicondylitis, also known as tennis elbow and golfer's elbow. That can be from a myriad of reasons. You can have a grip on your racket that is either too big or too small. You can have too tight of a grip on your racket. Your volleying mechanics can be poor, so those are some things that you want to consider if you are starting to develop those issues, or you've had them in the past and they're starting to get is talking to you. Rotator cuff strains. As we get older, we don't have to necessarily experience a shoulder injury for our rotator cuff to tear. Anatomically, one of the muscles does not have great blood supply, and you can just tear it. It's actually normal, just living. So that's one thing you really do want to be aware of. If you are one that loves to volley, like I do, just make sure that you are doing some sort of supplementation to your workouts that really targets your rotator cuff muscles, your scapular, your shoulder blade. So you want to take a look at that. Even though it's an underhand serve in pickleball, don't think that you're not gonna, you can't injure yourself with that. Any questions? I know I'm throwing a lot of information at you really fast. All right, why are these injuries happening? Good question. Number one, improper equipment. If I had $10 for every pickleball player that came to me and told me they were not playing in tennis or pickleball shoes, I would be on a yacht somewhere in the Caribbean drinking an umbrella drink. Super important. We're going to talk a little bit more about shoes. I brought in some of my daughter's tennis shoes so we can take a look at them. That is the number one thing. Do not play in shoes like this or those or running shoes. You have got to get the right equipment or you will set yourself up for failure. Okay?
So quick question, is there any difference, this controversy, is there a difference between tennis and pickleball?
Good question. Good question.
You pay me.
Yes. Yes, there is, but the differences are minimal. So when pickleball started coming out, we were playing, this is a hard court tennis shoe. There were no pickleball shoes, so we were playing in our hard court tennis shoes. When you play tennis, There's clay shoes, there's hardcourt shoes. You do have different shoes for the different surfaces. So we started playing in hardcourt shoes, which work totally fine. That's absolutely okay because you're playing on the same surface. As pickleball has become more popular, there's a company that has come out. They were the original, I think it's called Tyrol, Tyrol, I believe. They were the ones that came out with the first shoe engineered and designed for pickleball players.
Yeah.
So, now, does that mean that there's not other companies out there that make pickleball shoes? There are, but I've done some research and a lot of them have just been rebranded tennis shoes as pickleball shoes. Doesn't mean you can't play in them at all, but what you do want to look for, and we'll fast forward, to some slides with that, but there are some certain things you want to look for in that shoe, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But it is really, that is the one thing. If you play pickleball, please, please, please make sure you get the right shoes. Okay, number
So who
2.
sells these Tyrol shoes?
You can get them online, and there might be a place in town.
Buying shoes online is not really satisfactory.
There's a place in Rehoboth.
Rehoboth
The
Running.
first name is Sol.
Oh, okay.
I don't remember the last one. You can find it. So,
Okay.
S-O-L-E in Rehoboth. They sell shoes.
New Balance
And they
store.
have them.
That's what I got.
Yeah.
New Balance store.
Yep, New Balance has great shoes. They've got great, that's what I play in, New Balance, and you can go down to the store on.
So you're not buying, so you don't wear these Tyrol shoes?
I have not worn the Tyrol shoes, no, because
No.
my husband would probably not be so happy if I bought another pair of
Well,
shoes.
I myself play in tennis shoes.
You don't want to play in tennis shoes.
That's what I've been playing all along.
It's not good. It's a different type of sole. It catches.
Well, I've
on
been
the-
playing it all along, and when I play with, I asked one particular time, what's the difference between tennis shoes?
Not only on the front side, but the back side to that too. You want to make sure you're doing a nice stretch, post pickleball stretch as well. And poor preparation. This is a new sport for many people. Kudos to you for coming out and doing this.
I don't know if I want to now.
No, it's a great sport. You'll love it, but you're doing the right thing. You're doing the right thing. So, and that's where a lot of people just kind of go out there. They don't know the rules. They're not sure what it's all about. They haven't played a sport in forever. There's been a lot of misconception about pickleball, and because it's on a smaller court and you're using a different type of ball than a tennis ball and something that looks more like a ping pong paddle than a tennis racket, that it's going to be a lot easier, and I can just do it without any preparation, and that is incorrect. So it's a sport. I don't think anybody would go out and start playing regular tennis without doing something else, or running, or whatever the sport it is. Okay, other things you want to consider when you do play. Just having the knowledge is going to go a long way. Previous injuries that we've talked about. Is this going to be affected? How am I, if I've had knee surgery in the past, if I had 2 hip replacements and 2 knee replacements. Again, things to consider. And by no means am I saying don't play, just be knowledgeable. You know your body best, so maybe you're not a 3-hour-a-day candidate for pickleball. You might be an hour and a half or a 2-hour. If you do have osteoporosis or you're at risk for osteopenia, get a bone scan, just so you know. Most of you probably had one recently or one coming up. It's just a good idea, so if you know that you are at risk for a fracture, again, something to be aware of. Visit your doctor for a checkup, making sure that all systems are go. Back to the taking regular breaks when playing. So being nice to your body and not feeling like you gotta go for hours and hours.
Just because you're diagnosed with possibly osteopenia, wouldn't it be more helpful that you do play as opposed to not playing?
It is a great sport to play, but again, it's information. So you know, and it depends on how competitive the person is. I have a lot.
What I'm saying is, it's the impact on your bones is providing you.
It is, but you're probably gonna, as a female, you're gonna be more likely to break this. So what you wanna do is supplement with strength training. Rubber bands, weights, yes, yeah. So nobody should you don't really just want to only be playing pickleball, and we'll get into that.
And that's a valid question. So I'm sure you all, like anyone who has that kind of diagnosis has heard like you want to be up and moving a lot, right? So with osteoporosis, it is kind of like a bone weakness in a way, right? So the more weight bearing you have through the bones, the stronger they get. And that's kind of the idea of like, oh, play a sport is going to help you be on your feet more movement, right? And that logic is very sound. But we also know with sports, there's going to be more risk of falls, right? So if you have a higher risk, but also a higher reward, you just have to be educated about that risk, right? So don't go into it as just like, oh, this is for my osteoporosis, I should play pickleball. What we're saying is supplement it with strength training as well, which has a low risk, but a high reward too, right? So pickleball is not bad for osteoporosis, but it's definitely something we have to be aware of as we kind of get into the sport, right?
That's the thing, pickleball is a great sport. Everybody loves it. We just want to give you as much information as we possibly can to keep you healthy and on the court instead of in our offices. Okay, limiting injuries, we've talked about this a little bit. Proper warm-up and cool down, at least 5 minutes. Use the hard court tennis shoes or the pickleball shoes. This is the one right here. Incorporate other types of activity and training. Strength, cardio endurance, balance and agility, stretching, hand-eye coordination. Just taking your pickleball racket and the ball, bouncing it up and down. And then can you do that and walk around? Can you do that and stand on one foot? Those are all really simple things. Also, if you have not played before, take a lesson. And that way you will learn how to move on the court better. You'll have a good idea of, okay, well, when that serve comes in, where do I really need to be? What are some, it's just a really good idea of, and understanding the rules. So your brain is functioning and expecting things, and you're not like, wait, where am I supposed to be? Because if you don't understand, you can't really focus physically on what you're supposed to be doing. So doing the prep work is definitely more than half the battle. Make sure your technique is correct to try to limit those overuse injuries like the medial and lateral epicondylitis, and stay hydrated. Please don't forget to drink whatever your choice of beverage is in between changeovers, if it's water or Gatorade or whatever your hydration drink is. Get a hydration station going. This is that brand that I was talking about, the tie rolls. So what you're looking for in a shoe is going to have a wide toe box. You do not want your little piggies all jammed together, because when you're going forward and back on that court, your feet are going to jam into that toe box. So you want to make sure you've got some room in there, because you don't want to end up getting some sort of issues with your toes, or if you've got bunions, you want to make sure you've got enough room in there. The proper tread as well. So this one has right here a little bit of herringbone, which is this kind of design right there. This is not going to, this is going to move easily. This shoe can even slide with the proper technique on a hard court if needed. It's not going to stick like this shoe would. This shoe's got too much tread. Evan's shoes have too much tread. So you want to make sure that you can move and you're not going to stick to the court. Make sure it's lightweight and comfortable. You don't want to get it on and feel like you got a brick on your foot. Shock absorbing materials as well. You want to make sure also that it's got a good arch support, something that you're comfortable with. If it's not as high as you need, make sure you get a shoe that, sorry, this one is not a great one. No, wait, does the insert come out on this one? This insert is not come out, so make sure you have one that the insert can come out. The other thing that I've noticed is that's been trending are some that are like a mesh type shoe, which again are not great for your lateral stability. If you try to step, that mesh is going to give, and it is not going to give your foot any support whatsoever. A mesh shoe is fine for walking, things where there's not really side-to-side demands, and that is really kind of what is setting the difference between a tennis shoe and a pickleball shoe versus a running shoe. You want to have this nice right here, this lateral support. Because if you don't have that in the heel of your foot, when you shove to the side or you push, your heel's just gonna shift and you can roll right over in that shoe. So that is primarily the difference between a running shoe and a pickleball shoe or a court tennis shoe. The reviews that I was reading about the pickleball shoes, they do say they've got more lateral support than a court shoe because of the smaller court that you're playing on and the more lateral demands. But I think if you find a court shoe, a hard court tennis shoe that you're happy in, totally fine. And everybody makes them. Asics, Adidas, Nike, New Balance. There's a Skechers makes a pickleball shoe, and it has surprisingly good reviews consistently. I think I looked at 15 different reviewers, and that one was on everybody's list. So I was a little shocked by that. Was not expecting Skechers to be being dominant in the pickleball. This is going to lead us into. I put together a couple of exercises for a warm-up stretch. This is not, a warm-up, dynamic warm-up. We want to do a dynamic warm-up before you play, so your body is moving and getting preparation. We want to do some upper extremity, some lower extremity, some quick foot maneuvers if we can, and I'm going to let Evan take you through what we put together here for you.
Sure thing. So, as you can see, we wanted to start out with more of that kind of cardiovascular. We want to start out with something that gets the heart rate up a little bit, right? So we have jumping jacks up here to start. If you've never seen a jumping jack, it's just kind of like this, right? Feet and arms spreading apart. Now, not all of us can do that, especially right off the bat. Sometimes it's like, all right, that's asking a lot, right? So you can always modify it and start with just like one leg kicking out to the side, then the other leg. So it's less of a load as you're doing that. It's not as hard on the ankles and feet if you have a little bit of soreness. And as you get kind of good with that, then you can get into like the hop, right? So that's a jumping jack. The other cardiovascular one we have is at the other top part, and that's the high knees. So with high knees, we're getting a little bit of stretch into the gluteal muscles. We're also getting the heart rate up. It's more of a demand to kind of bring the leg forward, right? Because we have to be ready to step. So with the high knees, it's like you're running in place just with your knees driving up higher than they would if you're typically running, right? So that's another one. I would recommend doing something between like 20 reps of the jumping jacks and 20 reps on each leg of the high knees. Something to get the heart rate up, but not exhaust you right before you play, right? The next one is butt kicks. So with butt kicks, when you're bringing your heel towards your butt, right? So you're stretching out that quad muscle in the front, anatomy review from earlier. You're also activating your hamstrings, right? So with this one, you're still kind of running in place, but you're bringing your heels towards your butt. Now, if you can actually get your heel to your butt, you win. I can't do it, but something that's good for flexibility, right? The next one is a lateral shuffle. We kind of talked about this earlier, that there's a lot of lateral movement with pickleball, right? We got to be ready to move to the side to get to a ball, change positions, get ready, right? So this also activates the muscles on the outsides of your hips. Really good to prevent falling, right? If we're stepping and your shoe gets caught, your hip is going to be that correction, right? It's what's going to catch you. So you really want to do something like this to warm up. So that lateral shuffle is just kind of side to side. Get here, just something like 5 yards. Doesn't need to be the whole court. Good God, don't do that to yourself. But have a short little distance that you go back and forth on just a couple times. All right. So after that one, we have the forward lunge. So again, this is kind of brought up into the gameplay, right? So if a ball is hit kind of short and low for you, you can either go down low here, and you're not going to be very efficient. We have no weight behind what you're about to do. And you're also just kind of stuck, right? But if you come down and go for the ball, you have momentum coming forward, you have your weight behind the ball, you have a much better chance of having an accurate shot and putting power behind it. You also have less of a chance of falling. We kind of talked about with this one, we have the hamstrings pulling here, we have your weight coming forward. I already feel like I'm about to go just demonstrating that, and I don't want to embarrass myself in front of everybody. So I'm going to switch up and go into that forward lunge to do that. So it's a good way of warming up and kind of building that patterning so you're ready to do that. So stepping forward here, and I'm alternating legs. I'm gonna do something like 5 here, get a little breather, right? So I'm getting my quads turned on, my glutes turned on. I'm getting ready to move through that plank. Make sense? The next one is the lateral lunge. So again, stepping out to the side and changing direction laterally is going to be a big part of this game. So just like the forward lunge, except instead of being forward, I'm going laterally. I'm stepping out to the side. I can alternate legs here, coming out, right? Something to keep in mind with this one is try not to let your knees cave in, right? We don't want to step out and then have my knee coming in towards the middle. That's not fun. And then you're going to be upset with your knees and your knees are upset with you, right? Avoid that. Try to keep your knees tracking over like the middle of your foot, right? That's usually a safe spot. The knee is pretty much straight up and down on that one. Much happier knees, okay? Arm circles, we kind of talked about this one earlier too. Underhand serves, but overhand is a part of the game, right? If your shoulders aren't warmed up and they're not ready to go, as you go to do this kind of stuff, you put your rotator cuff at risk. And we talked about that earlier, that you don't really need anything traumatic to happen to the rotator cuff as you age, because it just kind of naturally degrades over time, right? So to get it warmed up and do yourself a favor and save it, right? We can do something like arm circles where we start here, start small, kind of work into it. So right now I'm kind of going backwards here, right? As I go backwards, I'm kind of thinking about that serve, right? It's that same motion. Now, as I come forward, I'm getting ready for that kind of like overhead slam, right? So both are applicable, you should be doing both. Again, walking leg raise, this one's more for the hamstrings. Guys, please start small on this one. Do not come out here like Karate Kid trying to kick the leg up over people's head. Don't do it. Start small. You're trying to just bring the leg up, and as you get warmed up, you can bring the leg higher and higher and higher. It stretches the hamstrings. Now, the reason we like to start with something like this instead of the just touch toes, right? When you're just stretching, right, before a game or before getting warmed up, it's not as effective, one, and two, it can kind of, if your muscle's cold, it can actually lead to more of that kind of like pulling sensation, right? But if you're getting some active movement in, that active warm-up promotes the blood flow a little bit better. So if I'm coming through here and swinging, I'm getting that same stretch I would if I was coming down to touch my toes. I'm not holding it very long, I'm just getting blood flow to the muscle, getting the muscle warmed up. So that's why we like that one. And then thoracic rotation, last one in the warm-up series, right? So I'm gonna stand here, I'm facing front, and I'm opening up as far as I can, turning here, opening up as far as I can. So think about like if the ball's hit behind you and you have to reach for it, right? Or if you're coming through and turning, my body is turning with these movements. We want to warm that up before we get into the gameplay. So starting here, leaving one hand behind, opening up as far as I can, just to promote that movement. Any questions with any of these movements here?
Another thing I did want to add is you can modify these however you need to. So, you know, when Evan showed you with the jumping jacks, you can just step right out. With the butt kickers, you don't have to jump. You can get a nice warm up this way. Same thing with high knees. If you're not comfortable with doing the jumping, you can just stand and do a high knee.
Absolutely.
Lateral lunges, you can hold on to a fence if there's one in the court, or just even use the net for a little bit of stability to help you come all the way down with those. So think about ways to modify for your body. So all of these lunges, the lateral lunge too. Hold on to something if you're not feeling super stable, and so make it work in your capability.
I have a little question. Can you do all these exercises, warm-ups at home?
I would recommend doing it before going onto the court.
So in front of everybody.
In front of everyone, put on a show.
In front of everyone.
Bring it to your friends and do it together.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And she was kind of like, you want to do this privately.
You can practice privately,
Yeah.
For sure.
and then when you get there, Then you can really get a good show on. I used to play tennis
The
with
bathroom's
the wind to warm up.
Go in
which-
We barely have enough room to stand in the court.
Okay, so that's not, okay. Just
Yeah.
what I asked.
If they're really early, you know, wherever you get.
There you go.
Yeah, before everybody gets there.
Exactly.
Yep. And then we just put together, because talking about ways to keep
Bless
you off of the bench. How many people just play pickleball and don't do anything else? Okay. How many people do some sort of regular stretching? Okay. How about, you can't, your body's not going to do well if you just play pickleball. You have to help to keep it flexible, keep it strong, keep your balance good, and that's what's going to really keep you on the courts. We've housed professional tennis players for many, many years. One of the things that I noticed right off the bat with these players is they would leave our house at 7, 8 o'clock in the morning, and they'd come back at 6 o'clock at night. And I was like, you playing tennis for that long? And they were like, no, we played for 2 hours. But what they did through the day, cardio, stretching, flexibility, any other strength training, they were like, we have to do all of this stuff to keep us playing for 2 hours. And that really has stuck with me for a long time. My daughter plays a D1 sport, and as she started getting better at it, and I was like, do you remember what the tennis player said? And she said, yes. So think about that. Tennis, pickleball might be your ultimate goal and whatnot, but make sure that you are supplementing it with all of those other exercises, balance training, yoga, all that stuff is great to keep your body in the best shape that you can to be able to play pickleball and enjoy other sports too. We did come up with some these are stretches that you can do. We just kind of pop these in before you wake up too in the morning. If you don't have a little stretching routine, this isn't necessarily, again, the end all be all, but we just thought of some really, some ones that feel good, that are easy to do, and you can have it done 5 minutes before you get out of bed in the morning. Especially if you take that first step and you're like, oh, I'm really sore, and about 5 minutes later you're like, okay, now I'm feeling better. So that is, give your body a little bit of happiness in the morning before you take your first step out of bed. And I think we might have, Rachel, did we get those printed out too?
They should be in the stack.
Okay. I got it right here. We'll hand out these stretches.
Are those good to do after?
For a couple just quick ones,
Yeah, just curious
that
what
be
you would
helpful?
do after playing.
Sure thing. So, especially like after the play, that's a really good time to get into like the static stretch, right? So static meaning you're kind of holding still for a little bit. So that kind of cool down helps just it helps bring the cardio down. So if you guys ever get off the court and your heart's just kind of pounding here, got it, right? So that kind of static stretching kind of helps calm the body down without making you just sit down for a little bit and then tighten up, right? So one thing like you can always start with is something like a hamstring stretch. So bringing the feet together, coming down to touch the toes. If you can't kind of hold that position, that's kind of irritating to the back because it can be for some people that bending forward. You can find a chair. I'll just pretend I have one, right? So I kick one foot out forward that I want to stretch, and I come towards the toe. And with that one, I can do a little bit better job keeping my back flat, right? Another one that you'll see commonly in like a PT clinic is laying down on your back and taking something like a dog leash or a stretch out strap and pulling the leg up. Like you said, it kind of depends on how big the space is that you can stretch out in. You won't be laying on the court while everybody's coming in. But so hamstring stretch is a good one. A quad stretch. So something where you can kind of like hold on to something and bring the leg back. Now that's not easy for everyone to do, so there's ways of modifying that. One way, again, that you can see in PT, and if you ever have trouble with this stuff that we would be kind of doing with you in PT, would be laying on the table, have your leg drop off the side, and again, having a strap to help bring the foot up, because a lot of us can't reach, right? So something like that. And a hip flexor stretch is another really good one. So the hip flexors, again, being more at that top of the leg in the front, right? So what you can do here is so I'm stretching my right leg in this case, the back leg. And what I'm doing is I'm kind of like almost stepping past it and leaving it behind, and I'm pushing my hips forward. So as I do that, I'm elongating this part of my leg, my hip flexors. So that's a good one because again, we're running a lot, we're moving forward, our step is quick, and so we have to cool down those muscles a little bit. So I'm stepping forward, pushing my hips forward, and I'm stretching this leg that I'm kind of leaving behind. So those are some like really quick ones you can do. This sounds silly, but going for a little walk, maybe even around the courts, is another really good idea to do. Okay, one, it's working like all the muscles you were just been using at a high pace. You're now bringing the pace down, right? Who here has ever had like issues with like blood pressure or any type of medications with blood pressure? I know a lot of us tend to have that, especially in America. That's kind of something that's very common as we age. So with blood pressure, we're playing, we're amping it up, right? Our blood pressure spikes, and then all of a sudden we stop moving, right? It can kind of make us lightheaded sometimes. It can put us at a little bit more risk of falling or getting dizzy. That's not what we need at all, right? But if you go for a walk, we still get the muscles pumping, so the blood keeps coming back to the heart, keeps circulating around, but it allows everything to calm down a little bit slower. So going for a quick walk around the courts might help you if you're experiencing something like that. Does that all make sense?
Yes. You can even cross, a little stretch like this is totally fine. We can put together, if we have your emails, right? And if it's okay, we can put together an email and send it to you and with some post-workout stretches, if that would be okay? Okay.
Yes.
Mention of neck.
Right. So concerning the neck, I mean, obviously if you're twisting really quickly and kind of pivoting here and I'm looking forward, that can put a little bit of stress on the neck muscles. A lot of times it's not one you see as commonly, so we were kind of covering more of those like peripheral joints, the joints kind of outside of the big torso, right? But the neck is important to have like warmed up. So some things you can do is those like neck rolls, right? Just have something where the muscles of the neck are now activating to bring me around and back up. But as far as like stretching goes, you can do things at the end too, that kind of like upper trap stretch, pulling to the side, stretching out the side of the neck. If it's more the back of the neck that feels tight, you can pull the head down towards the armpit. So if I'm pulling towards my right armpit, it's feeling more in the back left part of my neck. So that's kind of more directed towards like the spine part of things. But does that answer your question?
How long do you hold?
Sure. It kind of depends on your tolerance, what you want to do. I like to do more of like the 30-second holds as like the cool down part. So if I'm doing the stretches after I play, I'm gonna hold for around 30 seconds. Sometimes if you have like a little bit of discomfort or if the position's a little hard, you can do something more like a 10-second hold, but do more holds. So I would do like 10 seconds, 10 times kind of thing. But if I can hold comfortably, I'd like to go for around like 30 seconds.
If you do have restrictions in your neck mobility, especially extension, that's going to prevent you from being able to see a ball that's coming down and possibly doing the hit you want to hit. So with that, you may need to let that ball drop and then hit underhand, or that might be a good opportunity depending on if you've had cervical surgery and you really you have some serious restrictions. Modifications to your game, so you know that you can't look up like this, because then what you don't want to do is doing one of these. And that's what I was talking about when you taking a lesson or two as well, getting with a pro and letting him or her know what your restrictions are, because they can give you some workarounds for that and what to expect. Go through some scenarios when they're throwing up some lobs and you're like, okay, now I'm gonna let that ball drop, and have some scenarios and be ready for that. So when it does happen, you're not like, oh my God, what am I doing? And then you end up hurting yourself worse. So if you do have any sort of major restrictions, any joint restrictions, whether it's the neck, shoulders, or legs, that would be a good time to get with somebody that's a professional that has workarounds for that as well. The other thing we want to think about is concussions too, because there is a lot of backpedaling in pickleball. A better scenario is to turn around this way, go to get the ball, and then turn back this way, instead of because you don't want to fall, crack your head, and then get a concussion.
Don't backpedal.
Yeah,
they teach you, do not backpedal.
Yes.
The question I have is, I mean, I keep hearing about a lot of Achilles injuries playing pickleball.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at your sheets and,
Yeah.
you know, only thing I've been doing is I get on a step and I put my balls in my feet and I stretch my calves and Achilles. But I don't know if that is good or there's something better to get those
Great
stretched
question.
out.
Great question. So for stretching purposes, and again, kind of like towards the end of a session, that is a really good one to do. If you're already warmed up, like if you already kind of have the heart going a little bit, feel a little sweat breaking, that's when you can also kind of implement a stretch like that. If you want to warm up the Achilles, right? Because he's right, Achilles tears, and we kind of covered like that's a common injury. If you want to do something more preventative and warm up wise for it, we kind of like to do something a little bit more like plyometric and kind of get the muscle activated, right? So you can start with something, and again, modify as you need to. Hold on to something for support. But you can start with something just as simple as like a bounce in place, right? You can go into more of like just a heel raise and come in and just start out. So I'm kind of, as I do this, I'm squeezing my calf muscles. The calf muscles are the ones attached to the Achilles. So I'm pulling on the Achilles with this. Gets it warmed up. So I start with something like that. Then I get into a little bit more gameplay type thing where I'm bouncing, right? Because I'm going to have to quick cut and change direction. So there's a little bit of a push off from that leg. So I'm bouncing. And then I can transition into like a hop, right? Now, you don't have to go through the full hop with it. Again, modify as you need. But a good warm up for the Achilles would be something where it's like, okay, I'm going to activate it. I'm going to go up on my tippy toes. Shoot, I might just go on one foot, right? See if we can do, so with physical therapy, again, a little shameless plug here, we can assess your calf strength, right? So with your calf strength, if you want to know, is my calf strong, is my Achilles strong, am I ready to play something like this, right? You can hold on to something for balance and see if you can raise up on one foot 20 times. If you can do it 20 times, you get a check plus plus, you are good to go, right? If you're struggling to get 20, you might need a little bit of strengthening there, right? So good strengthening ones are kind of like coming up on the toes. You can do it with support. You can come up just on one foot and just practice it, and then getting into those bounces where it's kind of a higher load onto the muscle. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question?
Also be aware if anybody has had a cortisone shot anywhere close to your heel, like you've had plantar fasciitis, and you're starting to feel a little funky in that Achilles, do not ignore that because the cortisone does weaken your tendons and your ligaments. So make sure that if you have had any cortisone in the area, just be aware that it does weaken.
And that it tends to be, we tend to use our dominant side as it relates to the stretches. Would you do anything different if you're that person that already uses dominant side?
Sure. That's a good question. I wouldn't modify too much personally, just as someone who like, okay, so sure, you can spend a little bit more time on that side if you're kind of...
On the dominant side?
On the
Or
dominant
weaker?
side.
I mean, I feel like I have a weaker side.
Right. So if with the stretches, both sides should be warmed up, right? So if you think about like when you go to shift, and even though I'm like, okay, if we stay on the arm example, right? If we step out and I'm coming across this way, it is mostly my right arm doing the work. I'm opening out through here. But as I swing through, my left arm is now coming back too, right? Because we're trying to stay balanced. So both arms get motion as we play. Sometimes we do go double-handed as well. It's less common. But I would say like, as you go through, both sides do get motion. So if you're not warming up both sides, you might have a little bit of trouble with that, right? So I wouldn't modify as much where it's like, oh, if I'm right-handed, I'm gonna do 30 seconds on my right arm, but only 10 seconds on my left. I would try to keep it symmetrical, right?
Yeah, I was thinking in terms of the opposite, like given that one side.
Strengthening-wise, you may have to, but warm-up-wise, I wouldn't.
Okay.
So that kind of comes down to a personal basis of like, oh, I really feel like my left arm is lagging behind. I'm gonna spend a little bit more time on some strengthening for it to get it up to speed, sure. And it is normal to have a dominant side that's stronger. So like if you look at grip strength, your dominant side should be about 10% stronger than your non-dominant side. But if it's like, whoa, this is like noticeably different and probably outside that range, it doesn't feel right to you, sure, spend some extra time on the strengthening stuff. As far as warm-up goes, I would do everything fairly consistently on both sides.
You had mentioned patellar tendonitis. What is that? And how
Great
do you
question.
prevent it?
So patellar tendonitis tendonitis means inflammation of a tendon, right? So patella meaning your kneecaps, tendonitis being that inflammation of the tendon where your kneecap is kind of attaching into your shin bone, okay? So you might feel some like real achy, sometimes even sharp as you go to use it, pain underneath the knee, but on that like firm part, right? Some of us get it more towards the inside of the knee. That's likely not the tendonitis part. That's probably more something inside the joint, whether it be meniscus or osteoarthritis. So that's a little bit different. But with tendonitis, the best way of kind of warming it up would be kind of going through some like slower motions with it, right? So if I wanted to warm up for patellar tendonitis, I would do more of like a squat and kind of go slow on the way down and then come up. I'm going slow on the way down, coming up. But a big thing with tendons and kind of the main thing here is going back to what we talked about earlier of if you just get off your couch and go play and you keep doing this over and over again, it's going to wear on these tendons, right? Doing a good warm-up is going to give stress through the tendon where it's like an appropriate load, and then it's going to warm them up properly. If you're just getting off the couch, sometimes it can take a little while to set in because our muscles are going to get stronger faster than the tendons do. They get more blood. So if you're going to sit there and play for only pickleball and not do any strength training, not do any type of warm-up, that tendon's going to pay the price eventually. And so I would say do the warm-ups and do some kind of strengthening exercise where the tendon has to be loaded a little bit. Yes, sir.
Any recommended warm-ups for tennis elbow?
Yeah, good question. So a few things. Tennis elbow, those muscles go down into the hand. So doing something with like a grip squeeze. So if you have a stress ball, that would work. But also a lot of times as we are coming across, like I'm thinking of like a backhand, right? We're coming across and we're not getting good shoulder mobility. The next joint to do the work is the elbow, right? So if the elbow's doing a bit too much and the wrist is kind of bending back too much, we're putting too much stress on that, right? So getting a good shoulder warm up in where we're doing the circles, that back of the shoulder stretch, that will help kind of get you mobile enough where your form can be good. But as far as the muscle goes, any type of gripping and squeezing, you also can do something where it's like you're holding a weight and almost like rev the motorcycle, you know? That can kind of get this muscle here. Cool. All right. I think that brings us.
Care PT Plus, which is our mobile physical therapy. So now we can come to you. So yes, we are gonna work with people who are maybe can't get out of the house, but it's also convenient for you. If you don't necessarily have the time to come in for therapy, we can do a hybrid that maybe you come here for one visit and then we visit you in your home. So we'll be kicking that off April 22nd. Very excited about it. Spread the word. And there's some rack cards and brochures about that over there. So I'm going to introduce you our team. So this is Jean. Jean has been with us now almost a year.
Almost a year.
Yeah. So she has, like me, we've been around for a while, so she's been practicing for over 25 years. She went to College of Charleston in South Carolina, and then you went to Shenandoah, right?
Yes, Shenandoah University.
For PT, and she is from Fairfax.
Yes, I grew up in Fairfax, but I moved here from Charlottesville, Virginia.
So she is an avid pickleball player. She also competitively did tennis as well, so comes with a wealth of information for all of you. And then Evan's been with us almost a year. Evan graduated from Salisbury University, undergrad, and then PT school at University of Maryland Eastern Shore. So he is our orthopedic therapist here, and he also has kind kind of been thrust into pickleball and has done some talks, and he just did a latest video on pickleball that you can watch on any of our social media outlets. So I want to introduce them. We're excited to get started. We got a lot of great information to share with you. We had such a great turnout that we're going to do another one in the evening, May 15th. So if any of your friends want to come out for that, we'll be offering it here May 15th at 4:30. Awesome. So Jean, you can take over.
Welcome. Just wanted to say thanks for everybody making time on this rainy afternoon to come out and hear me and Evan and John talk to you and give you as much information as we can to help elevate your pickleball game, keep you off the bench and on the court. So how many people just started playing pickleball within the last year? Raise your hands. How many people have been playing 1 to 5 years? How many people have been playing more than 5 years?
I've never played.
You haven't?
No, so that's why I'm coming here.
Well done.